Join me as I put American and British English to the test and see if we really speak the same language. When it comes to language, it's natural to assume that American and British English are one and the same. But is that really the case? As the global community continues to shrink, it's more important than ever to understand the subtle differences between these two variations of the English language. One common misconception is that American and British English are identical, with the only difference being the accent. But nothing could be further from the truth. In reality, there are many differences from vocabulary to pronunciation, spelling, and even grammar. And these differences can lead to some pretty hilarious misunderstandings. I've lost count of how many times I've seen Brits and Americans confusing each other with everyday phrases only to realize that they're using different words for the same thing. Take, for example, the phrase gasoline versus petrol. While Americans use gasoline to refer to the fuel that powers their cars, Brits use petrol. And don't even get me started on lift versus elevator, or chips versus fries. These little differences might seem insignificant, but they can add up quickly, causing confusion and frustration for learners and travelers alike. But it's not just vocabulary that sets American and British English apart. Pronunciation is another key area where the two languages diverge. Take the word herb, for instance. While Americans pronounce it with a silent H, Brits pronounce it with a distinct H sound. And what about the way we pronounce the letter Z? Americans say Z, while Brits say Z. These might seem like small differences, but they can significantly alter the way we communicate. When it comes to spelling, American and British English also have their differences. Take the words color and color, for example. While Americans use the former, Brits use the latter. And what about program versus program? These differences might seem minor, but they can cause major headaches for writers and editors. In the US, people pronounce schedule with a hard SK sound, like schedule, but in the UK, it's all about the softer esh sound, schedule. It almost makes it sound fancier, like something out of an old British novel. Americans tend to cut straight to the point, while Brits add a touch of elegance. If you've ever been corrected by someone across the pond, now you know why. Which version sounds better? That's up for debate. Americans pronounce garage as gourage, with a smooth, French-inspired ending. Brits, on the other hand, say gar-idge, making it sound like a completely different word. The American version flows effortlessly, while the British pronunciation has a sharper, choppier sound. If you've ever been caught off guard by the UK version, don't worry, you're not alone. It's one of those words that instantly reveals whether someone grew up with American English or British English. In the US, advertisement is pronounced as advertisement, emphasizing the second syllable. But in the UK, it's advertisement, with a completely different rhythm. The British version makes the word sound longer, almost more refined. Americans like to keep things short and snappy, while Brits hold on to the original, drawn-out pronunciation. It's a small difference, but once you hear both versions, you'll never unhear them. Which one sounds more natural? Depends on who you ask. Grammar is another area where American and British English differ. Take the use of the present perfect tense, for instance. While Americans tend to use it less frequently, Brits use it more often to talk about completed actions in the past. And what about the use of collective nouns? Americans tend to use singular verbs with collective nouns, while Brits use plural verbs. But what do these differences really mean? Are they just a matter of linguistic nitpicking, or do they reflect deeper cultural differences? In many ways, the answer is yes. Language is a reflection of culture, and the differences between American and British English reflect fundamental differences in history, values, and identity. Take, for example, the way Americans tend to use more informal language, even in formal settings. This reflects a cultural emphasis on egalitarianism and informality. Brits, on the other hand, tend to use more formal language, reflecting a cultural emphasis on tradition and respect for authority.